Remember racing home after school, dropping your backpack in the hallway, and parking yourself 3 feet from the television screen just in time to hear that opening roar? It wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a battle cry that signaled the next half hour belonged to you and nobody else. Thundercats wasn't trying to teach you lessons about sharing or eating your vegetables. It gave you alien warriors with actual problems, villains who were genuinely terrifying, and a mythology so dense you needed your friends at lunch the next day to help decode what just happened. We're counting down 10 facts that prove this show was even stranger and more miraculous than you remember. Number 10, the show was created to sell toys that didn't exist yet. Here's where it gets backwards in the best possible way. Rankin Bass Productions, the same folks behind Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, didn't adapt an existing toy line like He-Man or G.I. Joe. They created the entire Thundercats universe from scratch specifically so toy company LJN could manufacture action figures based on the show. That's right. Lion-O, Panthro, Cheetara, all of them were designed in writers' rooms and animation studios before a single plastic mold existed. The creative team had to build characters compelling enough that kids would beg their parents for the toys that would eventually follow. It was a massive gamble. Create a mythology so rich, so visually striking, that children would desperately want to own pieces of it, even though those pieces didn't exist yet. Most shows reverse-engineered stories around existing products, resulting in glorified half-hour commercials with paper-thin plots. Thundercats did the opposite, and the freedom showed. Without toy executives dictating every character trait and design choice, writers could take risks. They could make Mumm-Ra actually menacing instead of a bumbling comic relief villain. They could kill off characters, explore real loss, and build a world that felt genuinely alien. The result was appointment television that happened to sell toys rather than a toy commercial pretending to be a story. Number 9. Lion-O's voice actor was a soap opera star who'd never done animation. Larry Kenney brought Lion-O to life. But before Thundercats, he was best known for voicing breakfast cereal mascots and doing radio impressions. His biggest claim to fame? Count Chocula. That's the guy they trusted to carry an epic science fiction series about exiled alien warriors. Kenny had no animation experience beyond selling sugary cereals to children, but directors heard something in his voice that worked. A sincerity, a genuine heroism that cut through the artifice of Saturday morning cartoons. He could deliver lines like Sword of Omens, give me sight beyond sight, without a trace of irony or camp, making Lion-O feel noble instead of ridiculous.
Sword of Omens, give me sight beyond sight.
But here's the strangest part. Kenny's Lion-O starts the series as a boy, trapped in an adult body, a teenager with the physical presence of a warrior, but none of the emotional maturity. That internal contradiction, youth wrestling with responsibility, became the show's emotional core. And Kenny, with his soap opera training and serial mascot background, somehow nailed it. He made you believe a character caught between childhood and leadership was stuck in a body that didn't match his mind. Years later, Kenny admitted he had no idea what he was doing. He just showed up, read the lines with as much conviction as possible, and trusted the directors. Sometimes the best performances come from people who don't know enough to second-guess themselves. Number 8, the animation was split between 3 different countries. You're watching Lion-O fight Mumm-Ra in one episode, and the art looks crisp, fluid, almost cinematic. The next week, same characters, but suddenly everyone's moving like they're underwater, and faces don't quite match their voices. You weren't imagining it. The animation quality was wildly inconsistent because production was scattered across 3 countries with different studios, different budgets, and different standards. Pacific Animation Corporation in Tokyo handled some episodes. Wang Film Productions in Taiwan animated others. And various studios in South Korea picked up the overflow. No unified vision, no consistent oversight, just a frantic race to deliver 130 episodes across 4 seasons without anyone collapsing from exhaustion. Each studio had its own interpretation of character designs, its own shortcuts and priorities. Some episodes looked gorgeous, with detailed backgrounds and smooth action sequences. Others looked rushed, with characters sliding across static backgrounds and fight scenes that repeated the same 3 frames over and over. It was animation roulette. You never knew which studio drew this week's episode until the opening credits rolled. But here's the miracle. Despite the chaos, despite the inconsistency, despite animators on 3 different continents drawing the same characters without ever meeting, Thundercats maintained a visual identity. The core designs were so strong, so distinctive, that even the weakest episodes still felt like Thundercats. Lion-O always looked like Lion-O even when he was moving like a puppet with loose strings. Number 7. Snarf was supposed to die in the first episode. Yes, the most annoying character in the entire series, the whining, fussy, snarf tag-along that every kid either loved or wanted to throw into the bottomless crevasse, was originally written to die during the crash landing on Third Earth. The script called for Snarf to sacrifice himself, saving the other Thundercats. A heroic death that would have set a dark, serious tone from the very beginning. Executives panicked. They'd already commissioned the toy. LJN had manufactured thousands of Snarf action figures, and if the character died in episode 1, stores would be stuck with unsellable inventory. So the writers were ordered to rewrite the scene, keep Snarf alive, and make him a permanent part of the team. What could have been a shocking, emotionally resonant opening, proving that Thundercats wasn't afraid to kill beloved characters, became a corporate compromise. Snarf survived, became comic relief, and spent the next 130 episodes providing exposition and saying his own name repeatedly like a Pokemon with anxiety. But here's what's fascinating. Keeping Snarf alive accidentally created something important. He became the voice of caution, the worried guardian who represented the fears every kid felt watching these heroes face impossible odds. He was annoying because he said out loud what you were thinking but were too invested in the adventure to admit. Maybe the executives, purely by accident, made the right call. Number 6. The Sword of Omens was originally just a sword. No eye, no mystical powers, no sight beyond sight. In early concept art, Lion-O's weapon was a standard medieval longsword with some decorative etchings, generic fantasy gear that could have appeared in any sword and sorcery cartoon cluttering the airwaves in the mid-1980s. Then, designer Peter Lawrence suggested adding the eye symbol, making the sword itself a living artifact connected to Thunderian mythology. Suddenly, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a responsibility, a burden, a mystical object that chose Lion-O as much as he wielded it. That one design change transformed the entire show's mythology, giving writers endless storytelling possibilities. The Eye of Thundera became a plot device, a moral compass, a character in its own right. It could show Lion-O distant events, warn him of danger, call the other Thundercats to his side, and serve as a tangible reminder that he wasn't just swinging a blade around, he was carrying the legacy of an entire dead civilization. And when Mumm-Ra or other villains tried to steal it, the stakes weren't just hero loses his weapon, it was the last remnant of Thundera falls into evil hands. One small design change created seasons of dramatic tension. That's the difference between a prop and an icon. Number 5, Mumm-Ra's voice was inspired by Vincent Price, performed by a guy who never met him. Earl Hammond brought the ever-living to life with that deep, resonant, genuinely unsettling voice that made Mumm-Ra one of the most terrifying villains in Saturday morning history. Hammond studied classic horror films, absorbing Vincent Price's theatrical menace and Bela Lugosi's dramatic cadence, then filtered it through his own Broadway training. The result was a villain who sounded ancient, powerful, and genuinely dangerous. When Mumm-Ra transformed from his decrepit mummy form into his muscular warrior body, Hammond's voice shift made the transformation feel real. The wheezing, weakened tone became a commanding roar that sent chills down your spine, even through your television's tinny speaker. But Hammond never met Vincent Price, never spoke to him, never asked for guidance. He just absorbed every horror performance he could find and created something original from the pieces. That's voice acting at its finest, taking inspiration without imitation, building a character that feels both familiar and completely new. Mumm-Ra worked because Hammond understood something fundamental. The best villains believe they're the hero of their own story. Every line dripped with wounded pride, righteous anger, and the conviction that he deserved to rule Third Earth. He wasn't evil for evil's sake. He was a fallen god demanding the worship he'd lost. That complexity made him unforgettable. Number 4, episodes were written completely out of order. You'd watch Lion-O learn a valuable lesson about leadership in one episode. Then the next week, he'd make the exact same mistake like the previous adventure never happened. Character development appeared and vanished randomly. Relationships deepened, then reset. The Thundercats would discover some crucial piece of Third Earth's history, then never mention it again. It wasn't bad writing. It was chaos. Scripts were commissioned in batches, assigned to different writers who had minimal communication with each other, then animated by different studios on different continents working from different production schedules. Nobody was tracking continuity because nobody had time. The goal was quantity. Deliver 65 episodes the first season, 130 total across 4 seasons, and hope audiences were too young to notice the contradictions. But you noticed. Every kid noticed. You'd argue with your friends about whether that episode where Lion-O fought the time tripper happened before or after the one where he met Bengali. You'd try to construct a timeline that made sense, only to realize the show itself didn't care about timelines. Accidentally, this created something interesting. Thundercats became mythology rather than narrative. Like Greek legends or fairy tales, the stories existed independent of each other. Each episode a self-contained adventure that contributed to a larger tapestry without worrying about strict chronology. It frustrated organized minds, but it also meant you could jump in anywhere, anytime, and the show still worked. Number 3, the show's racial diversity was radical for 1985. Look at the Thundercats team. You've got Lion-O, Tigra, Panthro, Cheetara, Wily Kit, and Wily Cat. Different species, different abilities, different personalities, but here's what matters. Panthro, voiced by Earl Hyman, was a black character who wasn't comic relief, wasn't a sidekick, wasn't there to make the white hero look better. He was the team's engineer, strategist, and often the voice of reason. He was indispensable. In an era when Saturday morning cartoons featured token diversity at best and racist caricatures at worst, Thundercats built a team where nobody's race or gender defined their role. Cheetara was fast, powerful, and psychic. Not the damsel, not the love interest, but a warrior who saved the male characters as often as they saved her. The twin Thunder Kittens weren't separated by gender roles. Both were equally reckless, equally brave, equally important. This wasn't performative diversity added to check boxes. The characters were designed as aliens, which allowed creators to sidestep network anxieties about representation while building a genuinely integrated team. You weren't watching a white hero with diverse backup. You were watching a team where everyone mattered equally. For kids watching in 1985, especially kids of color, seeing Panthro portrayed with dignity, strength, and intelligence mattered more than you can measure. He wasn't there to teach a lesson about tolerance. He was there because he belonged. That subtle representation, delivered without speeches or special episodes, shaped how an entire generation understood heroism. Number 2, the theme song was recorded in one take. Bernie Hoffer composed it. Jules Bass wrote the lyrics. And studio musicians had exactly one shot to nail the arrangement that would become one of the most iconic cartoon themes in television history. One take, no do-overs, no fixes in post-production, no safety net. Thunder, 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 Thundercats, ho! That roar, that guitar riff, that pounding drum beat that made you feel like you were charging into battle even though you were sitting cross-legged on carpet, all captured in a single performance. The musicians locked in, understood the assignment instantly, and delivered something that would echo through decades of pop culture. It wasn't overproduced, it wasn't polished until every imperfection disappeared. It was raw, energetic, and real. You can hear the human performance in every note, the sweat and adrenaline and joy of musicians having fun while creating something legendary. Modern theme songs get workshopped, focus grouped, and digitally perfected until all the life drains out. The Thundercats theme sounds like people actually playing instruments, and that authenticity is why it still slaps nearly 40 years later. Number 1, the show was canceled because toy sales collapsed, not ratings. Here's the fact that stings. Thundercats was still pulling solid ratings when Rankin/Bass pulled the plug after 4 seasons. Kids were watching, networks were happy, but LJN's toy sales were cratering. crushed by the unstoppable juggernaut of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And without toy revenue, there was no financial justification to continue production. The show that started as a vehicle to sell toys died because the toys stopped selling. The irony was brutal. Thundercats had transcended its commercial origins, becoming something genuinely beloved. But in the cold mathematics of 1980s children's television, creative success didn't matter. Only profit margins mattered. Rankin Bass didn't even give it a proper finale. The last episode aired with no resolution, no closure, no acknowledgement that the journey was ending. One week, the Thundercats were fighting Mumm-Ra, and the next week, they just weren't on television anymore. For kids who'd invested 4 years in these characters, who debated their adventures at lunch tables and played out their battles in backyards, the abrupt cancellation felt like betrayal. But here's what they couldn't kill: the memory. Thundercats burned itself into a generation's imagination so thoroughly that even without new episodes, it never really went away. It lived in syndication, in whispered playground conversations, in the way you'd occasionally roar, "Thundercats, ho!" with your friends, and everyone knew exactly what you meant. The show taught you that heroes could fail, that chosen ones could doubt themselves, that the last survivors of a dead world could build something new from the ashes. Those lessons survived the cancellation, the declining toy sales, the network executives who never understood what they had. Bonus fact, the reboot nobody asked for proved the original was perfect. In 2011, Cartoon Network tried to resurrect Thundercats with a darker, more serious anime-influenced reboot. Better animation, deeper mythology, complex character arcs. It should have worked. Critics praised it and viewers rejected it completely, getting it canceled after 1 season. Why? Because the original Thundercats, with all its weird animation inconsistencies, its out-of-order episodes, its toy-selling origins, already was perfect. It didn't need improvement. The flaws were part of the charm, the chaos was part of the appeal, and the sincerity that directors like Larry Kenney brought to those recording sessions couldn't be replicated with self-aware, modern irony. Sometimes the rough edges are what make something beautiful. Sometimes the thing that seems like it needs fixing is actually the thing that makes it work. The 1985 Thundercats, born from commercial desperation and created by scattered teams across multiple continents, became legendary, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Thunder, 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 that roar still echoes. And somewhere, in the part of your brain that remembers what it felt like to be young and believe in heroes, the Thundercats are still fighting. They never stopped. We've got more retro animation deep dives coming your way. Until then, may the Eye of Thundera watch over you.